So we won. We won.
The Supreme Court just dropped their decision.
In the 27 states that passed laws protecting women's sports will be for women again.
Not men or boys who identify as female.
So we won.
But what about me?
But what about me? I live in Minnesota.
I live in Washington.
I live in Wisconsin. I live in Oregon.
Colorado.
Connecticut.
I live in one of the 23 states that still prioritizes gender identity over sex.
In my state, nothing changes.
Also watch records fall to boys.
I'll still watch roster spots. Go to boys on my team. I still have to share a podium with biological men.
We about to fact check this. First, if you mess with me, make sure to hit that follow button. And this month we're celebrating Disability Pride Month. Let's get it. First, banning trans women from women's sports is not a win for women's sports. It's literally discriminating against a minority group. And the reasons for banning trans people from sports doesn't make any sense. One reason is that trans people are taking roster positions and scholarships away from cisgendered women. But if you just did some research, you would have realized that only 0.44% of athletes are transgender. Not to mention that there's more transgender boys playing high school sports than transgender girls. Not to mention that there's less than 10 trans people playing in a collegiate level. Which goes to the next argument. Where's the evidence that trans people are dominating sports? Trans people are allowed to participate in the Olympics since 2004, until recently where they're banned from representing their country. But research shows that no trans person has won an individual sport in an Olympics. And before I continue, no, Khalif is not trans. In fact, the only transgender individual that made it to a US team competing for a championship was Chris Mosier, a transgender man. Now, don't get it twisted, there are transgender athletes that's killing the game right now. We had Valentina Perciulio winning bronze in the 2023 Para-Athletic Championship in Paris, or Canadian midfielder Quinn, who actually was the first transgender to win a championship with their team in 2020. When will the world understand that trans rights is just human rights?
I actually do not give two fucks if trans kids, trans girls, are playing with cis girls in sports. And this is coming from somebody who has played ice hockey for 20 years out of her 23 years on this planet. You truly cannot look me in the eyes and convince me in any way, shape, or form that a 13-year-old trans girl going and playing girls high school hockey is the end of the world. I'm sorry, it's just such a non-issue. Everyone always wants to talk about like the biological differences too. I'm sorry, what is the difference between a 5'8" trans girl and a 5'8" cis girl playing an organized sport like hockey, for example? Please tell me the difference. If there's a girl who hits puberty early and gains 20 pounds of muscle and gets 3 inches added to her height, should she be banned from playing with girls her age because they haven't hit that same puberty milestone? Is that really, like, if let's think logically about this, that would also make sense per the argument that trans girls are not allowed to play women's sports. So someone just make it make sense to me, because personally I think it's fucking stupid.
What's up, family? So you got a win today, or we have a win when it comes to the Supreme Court. And I need you to sit with this one for a second because it's big. The Supreme Court just backed states that are protecting girls' sports. And before you scroll past thinking this is just another political story, hold on, because this touches real kids in real locker rooms. All right. This touches real kids in real locker rooms. Now, here's the split you need to understand right off top. 27 states now have laws protecting women's sports, meaning it stays female only. But 23 states still don't. And I'm talking about places like Minnesota, Washington, Wisconsin, Oregon, Colorado, and Connecticut. So depending on where you live, your daughter either has protection or she doesn't. And that's not abstract politics, family. That's a roster spot. That's a scholarship. That's a locker room your daughter walks into every single day. And we're going to break down exactly what the court ruled, why the other side is losing their mind over it. And yes, we are getting into this genital check argument that's been floated around because it's wild. But first, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, turn on those notifications because you don't want to miss where this is going. So let's break this down in plain English, because a lot of people are online making this way more complicated than it needs to be. The real legal question in front of the court was this: can a transgender athlete claim the same equal protection under the 14th Amendment that's normally used to protect people based on their sex? That's it. That's the actual question. And the court came back 6-3 and said no. States can pass laws that require school sports to be organized around biological sex, not gender identity. Now, let's be real clear about what this is not, because the other side wants you confused on this part. This is not some nationwide ban stopping trans people from playing sports anywhere. That's not what happened. What happened is states got confirmed authority to set the rules for their own schools. That's it. Now, here's what this actually looks like in real life. Imagine your daughter. She's been training all year, waking up early, missing time with friends, all building toward one shot at the state championship. And then she loses her spot, not because someone worked harder, but because a bigger, stronger biological male competitor took the spot instead. That's the scenario this ruling is actually about. That's what parents have been watching happen for years. So here's the practical result of all of this. 27 states now have laws on the books protecting female only competition. That means the rules are set that means parents in those states know what to expect. But 23 states still let gender identity override biological sex in school sports. And as I said before, that includes Minnesota, Washington, Wisconsin, Oregon, Colorado, and Connecticut. So if you live in one of those states, nothing changed today. That's important for you to know because this fight isn't over everywhere. It depends on your zip code right now. And here's the point I really want you to land on. The court didn't invent some brand new rule out of thin air. All they did was confirm that biology is real. That's it. It's measurable, and states are allowed to build actual policy around it. That's it, family. That's the whole ruling stripped down to what it really is. Now, here's where it gets interesting because the other side is not taking this well at all.
It's Tuesday night, and the Supreme Court said it's okay for states to create bans on transgender people playing sports. What they weren't clear on is who gets to decide who's transgender and how do you prove you're not. Genital exams. And in 23 states and at the federal level, every time Democrats have tried to propose an amendment that would ban genital exams on minor children, the GOP has voted it down. And this will impact cis children far more because statistically, it is more likely that someone will accuse a cis child of being trans than you will actually find a secret trans person. So here it is in black and white, and the GOP and Republicans have voted it down every single time it comes up for a vote. No student athlete shall be required as part of resolving a grievance submitted under this section to expose the student athlete's genitals, buttocks, anus, breast, or any other private or intimate body parts in order to determine the student athlete's biological sex. And if the student was subjected to a genital inspection, they would have the right to seek civil action against the state educational facility or the people who tried to inspect their genitals. And the GOP and Republicans voted it down every time at the state and federal level, which can only mean that they want there to be an option for genital inspections. Now, we have offered them to say that we'll give you a doctor's note, okay? All student athletes, as it is now, have to pass a sports physical and get a note from a doctor saying that they are healthy enough to compete. That doctor's note could also list that athlete's gender assigned at birth or their sex assigned at birth. That should satisfy them. But it doesn't. People who are going for these trans bans are not protecting cis children. In fact, they are putting them in more grave danger because anybody can just accuse anyone else of being trans and then subject that person to potential genital inspections or other humiliating tests of gender. And we see this happen at all levels of women's sports where cis women are accused of being trans when they are not. Mani Khalif, the boxer from Algeria, was accused of being trans. She's not.
So right after this ruling dropped, the reaction started flying, as you guys just seen. And I mean flying fast. You had activists, commentators, folks all over social media calling this bigotry, calling it hate, saying this reduces trans people to second-class citizens in this country. And look, I watched a bunch of these clips myself, and the emotion behind them is real, family. I'm not going to sit here and pretend it isn't. So let's actually walk through what the argument is because you need to understand it before you can judge it fairly. The claim is this: if the court says trans athletes can't use the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause the same way it's used for sex-based protection, then trans people are being told their constitutional rights don't count the same as everybody else's. That's the actual legal argument being made, not just hurt feelings and actual legal theory. And I want to give that its fair shake for a second because some people watching this ruling are genuinely scared right now. They feel like the ground just shifted under them, like the country just told them they matter less. That fear is real, and I'm not going to sit here and act like it isn't because pretending people's emotions don't exist doesn't help anybody understand this issue better. But here's where it doesn't add up, family. The ruling never said trans people have fewer rights as citizens walking around in this country. That's not what 6 justices signed off on. What they said is a lot narrower than that. Sports categories can be organized around biological sex. That's the whole ruling. It's not about voting rights. It's not about housing. It's not about employment. It's about who lines up on a field or a court in a girls' division. So when you hear people saying this makes trans people second class, quote unquote, pump the brakes for a second because that's stretching a narrow sports ruling into something way bigger than what it actually says on paper. And here's a number that keeps coming up in this whole debate online. And I think it actually works against the people who are the most upset. Some estimates floating around put transgender athletes at under 0.5% of all athletes nationwide. Under 1%, family. Think about that for a second. If the actual number of affected athletes is that small, then ask yourself, why is the emotional reaction this big? That gap right there between the size of the policy change and the size of the reaction tells you something. It tells you this was never really just about roster spots for a handful of kids. It was about something bigger underneath, about who gets to define categories in this country and who doesn't. Because let's be real for a second, this fight was never actually about erasing a whole group of people from existing. Nobody serious is arguing that. The real fight, the one nobody wants to say plainly, is about who's allowed to walk onto the field in girls' sports specifically. That's the actual question. Everything else is noise built on top of it, and this is where they thought they had a gotcha. So let's talk about the genital check argument. And before we get to that, I want you guys to check out this last clip.
Meanwhile, he's still trying to get his voter suppression act done, and the Republicans are still struggling with trans sports.
They are struggling with the trans sports, and they're writing legislation that is hurting their children more. The most recent piece of legislation that just got sort of decided between the Supreme Courts was this idea that states are allowed now to discriminate against trans kids who want to play in girls' sports. Now, that's going to affect maybe 12 or 15 kids who are trans across the nation that want to play girls' sports. It's going to affect millions of little girls who play sports, because one of the things that the GOP similarly refuses to agree with Democrats on is if there's going to be a ban on trans sports, then there ought to be a ban on genital exams, because who gets to decide who's trans? Can I just be at a game and watching a girl excel and go, well, she's playing too good, she must be trans, let's check her out? And in 23 states, GOP has voted no, we don't want to ban genital exams. We want that to be on the table for us going forward. So I just think we've reached a place of madness, Ali. Like, this is a crazy madness where the escalated investment in Trump's priorities, things like trans sports bans, while he's not prioritizing housing, have made us just absolutely lose our minds and lose focus on what is reality, what is humanity, and what are we even doing?
So there you have it, family. The genital check argument. So here's the gotcha they thought they had, family. And I want you to follow this close because the logic is wild once you slow it down. The claim going around is this: if you support banning biological males from girls' sports, then you must also support genital exams to enforce it, because how else would anybody know for sure? That's the argument. And off the back of that argument, you got legislation being pushed, bills specifically written to ban so-called genital checks on student athletes. And when Republicans in 23 states voted these bills down, the other side ran straight to calling that proof, saying, see, they want the option to check kids' private parts. Now, to be fair, let me give their framing its full weight before I break it down, because the argument isn't coming from nowhere, right? They're saying without a law on the books, some cisgender girl who just looks strong, who looks fast, who looks a certain way would get accused or could get accused of being trans and then get pulled into a humiliating exam over it. And if that's really what's happening in the schools across this country, I'll be right there with them, demanding the law myself. I want to be honest about that. But here's where it doesn't add up. And this is the part nobody on that side wants to sit with. Every single student athlete in this country already goes through a sports physical before they ever step on a field or a court. That's not new. That's not political. I have been myself, being in high school and going through for track meet, for being in a part of the track team, being a sprinter, middle school when it came to playing basketball. So that's not new. That's not political. That's just how youth sports has worked for decades. A licensed doctor checks that child, confirms they're healthy enough to compete, and signs off with a note. That note already establishes biological sex medically on paper from an actual doctor. So the entire premise of the bill that schools need a new law to stop invasive genital exams falls apart immediately, because the system that already exists handles verification through a doctor's office, not through a coach or a principal or some parent in the stands. And I want you to sit with this next part, because it's the part that really exposes the whole thing. Show me the case. Show me one documented instance of a school official, a politician, a coach, anybody performing a genital exam on a child to determine their sex. I'll wait. I'll wait, family, because it's not there. There's no record of it. There's no lawsuit about it. There's no news stories about it happening anywhere in this country. And you cannot build a law to stop a crime that has zero documented cases. That's not protecting anybody. That's manufacturing a threat that doesn't exist. And here's where the double standard really shows up, because the same side making this argument uses the exact opposite logic on a totally different issue. Ask them about voter fraud, and you'll hear it's so rare. It barely happens. So we don't need voter ID laws to fix a problem that isn't real. Fine. I understand that logic, even if I don't fully agree with it. But now flip it to the genital exams in school, something with zero documented cases. And suddenly the argument changes to we need a law right now to stop this. You can't have it both ways, family. Either rare things need laws or they don't. Pick one and stay consistent. So let's call this what it actually is. This bill was never about protecting kids from some imaginary exam nobody's performing. It's a distraction built specifically to take a parent who just wants a fair game for their daughter and repaint that parent as somebody obsessed with children's bodies. That's the real play here. It comes off like, and it's easier to make your opponent look creepy than admit you lost the actual argument about fairness in sports. Now, let's talk about what this actually means for regular families going forward. And here's what this actually looks like in real life, family. A mother in Ohio can send her daughter to practice knowing the league rules protect her spot, protect her category, protect her shot at a scholarship. A mother in Minnesota can't say the same thing right now, and that's not a hypothetical. That's just where the map stands today. Scholarships, roster spots, podium finishes, record books, all of that is still very much in play across 23 states, regardless of what the Supreme Court just handed down. Because remember, this ruling gave states permission. It didn't force a single national standard on everybody. And that's really the bigger pattern underneath all of this. Bigger than any one sport, any one state, any one ruling. This is about whether states get to write their own rules for their own schools, or whether one definition gets forced down on the entire country from the top. That question is way bigger than sports, family, and is going to keep showing up in other fights long after this one settles down. Now, I want to be honest with you, because I'm not here to oversell this as some final buzzer. More legal challenges are likely coming. This issue isn't fully settled everywhere, and if the pattern holds, you're going to see lawsuits move in both directions in different states over the next few years. That's just where we're at. But here's the thing I need you to walk away with. Wanting fairness in girls' sports and respecting people as human beings are not opposites, family. You can hold both of those at the same time, and honestly, you should. So here's the final verdict, family, plain and simple. The court didn't strip rights away from anybody. All they did was say, biology gets to matter in girls' sports again. That's it. And that reminds me of Proverbs chapter 12, verse 15. The way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but a wise man listens to advice. For years, we ignored plain reality just to avoid an uncomfortable conversation. And now the correction is finally here. Now, and if you're not a spiritual person, here's the wisdom script down. Ignoring reality doesn't make it disappear. Facing facts head on is what actually protects people. Let me know your take in the comments. Like, subscribe, turn on your post notifications, spread that peace, love, and positivity. Let the love supersede the hate, family. As always, we just having a productive conversation. I'll catch you next one. Again, enjoy your 4th of July. Enjoy the 250th birthday of this amazing country, the United States of America. Stay safe, stay blessed. Many more, much more prosperity to your family, from my heart to yours. Love you guys. Appreciate you for rocking with me. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.